Hello everyone, we're here today with Mark Murphy for another installment of our Q&A sessions. This time around, we're just going to get to know Mark a little bit more. So, Mark, how are you? Are you good?
I'm very good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. As a director yourself, who are some of the directing heroes that you have who inspired you or whose movies you always go rush to see?
Well, I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but obviously Steven Spielberg, I think, is an influence for everyone in the film industry. But I guess outside of him, there's a few. Tim Burton, the film that I saw that made me want to work in film was Tim Burton's Batman in 1989, and I saw that several times, and it was like, okay, this was my moment when I was like, aha, this is what I want to be doing. So I guess Tim Burton is one of them. Although since the Planet of the Apes film he did, it sort of went down. Um, I sort of feel like Helena Bonham Carter's the curse on that one. Then yeah, that's when they met, and she was in all his films afterwards. David Fincher, anything he does, I'll make sure I see. I still regard Seven as his best work, and also Alien 3. I know no one else likes it, but I love it. Terrence Malick, just because of his interesting story, and I think Thin Red Line is truly one of the greatest films made. Lastly, it used to be Michael Mann. Last of the Mohicans and Heat and The Insider were incredible films. And then yeah, he just went downhill with Ali. So he's sort of off my list, but for a time he was one of those people that whatever he was doing, I'll go and watch.
I know you mentioned Spielberg. Do you have a favorite Spielberg movie?
Yeah, well, my favorite movie all time is Jaws. I know for a lot of people it's like, really, a shark film? But if you actually watch the film, it's an amazing, it's a masterpiece of character interaction. The three men on the boat, and yes, it was officially the first blockbuster, the first film in America to surpass $100 million at the box office. Although when you count inflation, a lot of films did that before. We think of blockbuster these days, and they tend to be sort of generic cookie cutter action films, Marvel films. But if you watch Jaws now, you'd actually see it as a much different film. That and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, I think, is a fantastic film. And then obviously Schindler's List is pretty good as well.
So let's say you were making a new project, you had an unlimited budget, and you could work with anyone in the world who you wanted to. What's your top three actors or actresses that you would love to work with?
Well, unlimited budget is a poison chalice because with more money comes more interruption from, i.e., the money people. So you have less and less control. It's actually better to have a smaller. But let's pretend it was without any interference. Anthony Hopkins is obviously one. I actually would have liked to have worked with Michael Gambon. Sadly, he just passed away. I think maybe Jodie Foster. Throwing in another one. It'd be fun to see what Arnold Schwarzenegger would be like. See
Mhm.
if I could get a really deep, incredible performance out of him. That would be an interesting challenge.
I know you've seen thousands of films, obviously. If there was one film in history which you could say you were involved in or you had some direction on, what film would that be?
The assumption by saying that is it was a great film. If it's a great film, it was a great film without me. So I wouldn't want to sort of take any responsibility for ruining it if I was involved. Actually, I tell you what, the one film I wish I had directed that has been made was The Woman in Black, and that's simply because that was something I was trying to shop around about 25 years ago, and no one thought it was a good idea. There was one producer who said, "Nah, it's there's no market for horror," and that was like the week
Mhm.
that Scream opened and made over 100 million. There was another producer that I sort of knew, and he's actually gone on to win an Oscar, so he's quite a
Wow.
successful producer now. And I pitched it to him, and I went back to see it at the West End, and funny enough, he had gone to see it as well. So I guess he'd taken my advice. Yeah, no one ever made it. He passed. And then, of course, they made it with Daniel Radcliffe, and it was the most successful British horror film in sort of 30, 40 years. So it's like, yeah, I had been pitching that and you all ignored me. So yeah, I would have liked to have done that because that was a project I
Yeah.
already wanted to do.
Seeing as though you've brought up horror films and it is nearly Halloween, do you have any favourite horror films or a particular category of horror films that you enjoy?
Yeah, I think the Thing, the John Carpenter version is an awesome film. That's one of those. I'm not a massive horror fan, I'll be honest, apart from obviously
Mhm.
wanting to do The Woman in Black. And it depends on the other horrors, like obviously Silence of the Lambs is a psychological horror. Yeah, so I mean, if I was to recommend, okay, you've got Halloween coming up, you're going to have a Halloween marathon of 3 films to watch. I would recommend 3 different types of films. I'd recommend The Thing. I'd recommend Silence of the Lambs, and then maybe the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or something.
Going back to when you first started off, was there any particular advice that you were given when you were just starting as a director that's really helped you develop your skills and, hone your
Um,
craft?
Not really advice, but more of a work ethos. So when I started at the TV theatre film school, it wasn't just a case of, okay, right, you want to direct, let's focus on directing. It was like, right, we do everything here. You need to do wardrobe, you need to try out camera, sound, makeup, acting, everything, every single thing, every sort of discipline within the industry you had to have a go at, and which sort of worked well because as a director you do need to communicate across the departments. So that helped, but more so it was unlike say a university when you have X amount of lectures or sessions a week. This was like 6 days a week working beyond the hours anyway, just non-stop working. I remember the first film I worked on, Welcome to Sarajevo, very old film. I came on towards the end as a runner, and I instinctively was literally running around trying to get everything done as efficiently but as quickly as I could. And they were like, "You got to slow down. You don't have to rush around doing everything." And it was like, no, this is how I've been trained. It's like get on and work, don't sort of sit around.
Mhm.
So, yeah, there was no advice, but it was definitely a training process, which was, you know, as good.
So when you're starting work on a new project, do you have a certain thing that you do or a certain routine that you get yourself into?
Well, it depends on what the ambition for it is. If it's just let's try and make this next year, then there's a different process than, oh, this would be a good idea. Let's write a script and see what happens. So, for example, the projects I'm working on now, I know I will make.
Mhm.
So it's a more mechanical process in terms of, right, let's focus on how efficient and in terms of budget and schedule, etc., we can make this, and who we can get, and da 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 da, and then try and tailor it around that. I mean, assuming you've got the basis of an idea, I think whilst writing the script, you've got more elements in mind, and that sort of helps in terms of knowing. It takes out some of the vagueness. If you don't know, then it's just like, I'll write out a treatment. Could be 10, 20, 30 pages, see if it works, and then put it into a script and then send it off to a couple of people, and then just focus on something else.
And what about the actual filming process? Do you have any kind of mythology to it? What filming
Well, I
process
think
like
the
for you?
the last one I did was a massive failure. I wore too many hats, and when you try to do too many things, you can't do any one thing properly. With what I'm doing now, having learned from that mistake, I'm sort of handing over control to someone else as quickly as I can, so I can literally just focus on directing, working with the cast, the crew, looking at the technical sides of it, but not worrying about the logistics or the finance or the contracts. I think that's key to it. You just want to narrow what it is that your sort of purview, your role within the whole project is, so you can do your best job.
And one final question for today. What is your favorite project that you've worked on out of everything you've done? What did you have the most fun doing?
I think the first 2 films, because I had no idea in terms of I was just focusing on making them and enjoying making the idea. It was the idea of, hey, I'm doing it. I'm directing a crew and cast. So because that is the initiation of something that I'd always wanted to do, there was sort of a lot of fun with that. And because they were low budget, it was less rules and restrictions, let's say. Whereas afterwards, if I do something now, then I'm more aware of the painful side of it, which is, keeping on budget, keeping on schedule, the consequences of not, the hangover of any mistakes that may then result in not being able to sell it properly because you don't have the right contracts or you don't have the right information or permissions and da 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 da. So the more you do it, the more it becomes an operation rather than adventure. So I think my first two films, the first one was absolutely awful, but it had no reason it would have been good because it was shot in about 2 weeks, and but it was a lot of fun. The next one was also fun because we were all on location. I think that's the other thing. When you're on location somewhere, it's a little more interesting.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Mark. We're really looking forward to whatever you do next.
Me too.
And it's been lovely chatting with you.
Thanks. You too.